The history of Wadley Farms begins in 1852 when my great-great-grandfather, Joseph Wadley, immigrated from New England to Utah. After living there a few years in Pleasant Grove, he was granted a tract of 160 acres here in Linden. On this 160 acres, it was all originally sagebrush. It took him about 10 years to divert the Provo River into what was referred to as the North Union Canal to put this sagebrush land under cultivation. Joseph was a horticulturist by trade. He made 5 trips back to England to bring his multiple varieties of fruit stock and brought back a cider mill to press the apples in order to propagate his orchards here. In 1879, he began his home here. He built it out of hand-hewn rock, similar to what they had in New England, and developed more of a formal country home offset from the road about 100 yards. He had the individual who crossed the plains with him, who landscaped Liberty Park to help landscape his formal gardens in the front. In 1904, Joseph passed away. In 1907, his son Joseph Daniel purchased the farm from the remaining family members. Joseph Daniel was very active in civic affairs in Pleasant Grove and was the mayor. He too was a horticulturist, and as such he was appointed by the governor to work with the state in promoting Utah crops to other areas. Utah became a major exporter for fruit to those surrounding states. Joseph Daniel liked to build. He built many of the structures on the farm, of which were still standing when I purchased it. In 1925, my grandfather, Joseph Daniel Wadley Jr., purchased the farm from his father. He was a veteran of World War I, having fought with the U.S. Army in Normandy, France. He was also an attorney. He purchased the farm and had his law practice in Provo. But over time, he gave up most of his law practice in that he enjoyed farming so much. He too carried on the tradition of having a very productive farm. My grandfather worked the land for 60 years. As grandchildren, we spent many hours helping with the farm, pruning the orchards, harvesting the fruit, irrigating the land, mowing the grass, and herding the cows. As such, the land became part of us. It became who we are. My grandfather passed away in 1985. 3 years later, when I finished medical school, we were looking for a place where we could raise our family. My mother encouraged me to consider purchase of the farm and living here. After a lot of thought, we elected to bring our family here. The farm, though, unfortunately, was in severe disrepair. The orchards were aged, many of the trees were dead. The buildings needed to be replaced. The home was old. We struggled with what we should do. The house had been built in 1879. It was recommended at that time we simply demolish the house. We struggled with that, and after reading the words of William Morse, quote, "These old buildings don't belong to us only, they belong to our ancestors, and they'll belong to our children unless we play them false. They are not ours in any sense to do as we would like with them. We are only trustees for those who come after." Those words resonated with us, and with that thought, we remodeled the house. We took this 100-year-old structure, we did all the modern improvements that needed to be done, and kept it aesthetically as it would appear back 100 years prior. As the farm fell under my stewardship, it became a challenge to try to figure out how to make it economically viable. We started with some hay, a few cows, but I needed a barn. They were demolishing a barn for a subdivision in Orem. I found where I could move it, and we brought it to our place. After a while, with the hay barn established, individuals asked if they could have their wedding here. We found that that was of interest to others, and as such, we improved the looks of it from more of a rough hay barn to more of a Victorian style with siding and shutters. As the wedding business increased, I elected to bring another building to the farm. This was the railroad building out at Toplift. It was where the railroad spur ended and where the mine business was conducted. top lift had been abandoned in 1937 as the mine had closed down, and they'd moved the building into Lehigh. I liked the looks of it, so with some help, I brought in that building onto the farm. We've improved that building also in the Victorian style with gingerbread ornamentation, siding, and shutters. After it became evident from the history from my father's side that my other grandfathers, College and Manning, had worked and managed the Toplift mine. The granary was built over 100 years ago by my great-grandfather, Joseph Daniel Wadley. It was constructed well out of tongue and groove and was made to keep the mice out of the stored grain. We fixed it up in a Victorian style, also with the shutters, the siding, and the gingerbread ornamentation, and used it as the groom's room. It became evident that it'd be nice to have an arboretum where we could grow our plants in the spring, getting ready for the summer planting. I struggled with how to make one look aesthetically and pull into the rest of the grounds. I found a Quonset-looking hut. We cut the roof off and built more glass panels underneath it to make our arboretum, which allows us to do this very thing. My wife and I, while traveling through Napa Valley, California, were particularly impressed with the old world Tuscany feel that the grapevines and some of the structures had. As such, we came back and after discussion elected to change this more formal Victoria look into an old world Tuscany sort of feel. But the question is, how do you do that? For the hay barn, what we did was cut open the second floor. We took large timbers and beamed those timber structures to give it that sort of old world feel. We put balusters with a belly roll that gives us that soft flow. By opening up the second floor, it allowed visitors to look and observe the proceedings down below. On the exterior, we put Tuscan stone, lots of beams, and lots of iron structures. We wanted to make the railroad building so it was more accessible to the formal gardens. We cut into the railroad building 7 major double doors, which when all are opened, allows for not only the air and the breeze to come in, but it gives you this feeling that the building is an extension of the gardens. We took again the siding off and the shutters and beamed it with stucco along with stain. We put in a new porch that was all stone and took away from the wood feel of the porch. We engineered and designed a fireplace to sit at the end and beamed the ceiling with lots of steel and iron and 3 large chandeliers descending from the ceiling. To change the granary from this more formal Victorian look, and now Tuscany, we decided we would try our luck at building turrets. But how do you build a turret on a granary? Well, this is where we got the idea of using a steel tank, putting it on end, surrounding it with indigenous rock from the farm that we had harvested, and then on top putting a roof made out of slate. The turrets presented an interesting challenge for both the glass and for the doors. It's a round structure, so we had to design and engineer our doors so that they look round, kind of like a boat. We did that with steel, cutting them on angles, and then putting our steel hinges so it all fit aesthetically. So we found 4 things resonated with Old World. Number 1 was lots of rock, real stone, not cultured stone. Number 2, lots of iron, lots of steel structures. Number 3, lots of beams, big timbers that make a statement. And the last is lots of green, particularly ivy, that give the feeling of it being aged. With that, we needed to put our rock walls up. These allow not only for privacy and soundproofing, but aesthetically they pull into the feeling of more of a fortress. You'll notice there are really no straight lines in nature. So using PVC pipe to give us soft curves, we created these arches. And in the arches, we placed large timber doors with lots of iron to give you that fortress feel. One of the structures we found that resonated with Old World was the vineyards themselves. Unlike orchards, vineyards have more of a romantic, Old World feel. We didn't have a lot of vineyards in Utah of which you could look at, but we planted 2,000 different grapevines, and we structured arbors so that these vines would be trained to provide a nice, pleasant walkway and even to have formal dinners within the vineyards. Vineyards are labor-intensive, so each fall, for about 6 weeks when the grapes come into harvest, we have individuals come to bottle and cork grape juice. It allows them to go home with something that reminds them of their extraordinary event here. As the building of the farm continued, particularly with the vineyards, and as the events increased, I decided I needed a larger venue. I thought, what better structure could there be than a castle? A castle is reminiscent of old world and a protection. We were all fascinated with castles. I studied many different castles. I did a drawing of how then it could look and work proportionally. Made a clay model, and then with the engineers, we put together the plans for this castle. So the castle on the exterior needed to resonate with the rest of the structures here on the farm. On the outside, we carved blocks along with Tuscan stone to give it that old world feel. We built the turrets on the ground, and then with the crane, we were able to lift them into place. Once into place, we were able to put on the finials and across the top of the building, the window watch to give it its final appearance. On the extensions for the west side and for the south side, we had the roofs, which also were built on slate. Now, slate is a rock. It's hand-hewn rock and split. You can't walk on it because it cracks. So these need to be built on the ground. So we built these roofs for both the west side and the south side on the ground, and then lifted them also into place. On these build-outs, we needed to have a decorative dormer to break up the monotony and give the appearance of it being occupied. We were able to build one on the ground to lift it into place. One of the things that I like to do is use existing material from other buildings that's been salvaged. When you come into the castle, you'll notice first the massive beams. These were harvested out of Hill Field. We took 2 of those beams, 60-foot long, and 100-foot beam that was harvested out of the fire station, and from those 3 beams, we engineered 1 beam. And from those, we had 14 beams that we were able to put up that give us this massive wood look. On those, we put finials wrapped with iron, structured in such a manner they make that bold, old-world statement. The floor is 100-year-old Douglas fir that was reused originally for the roof of the Geneva steel mill before it was disassembled. Most of the wood that you'll see in the castle was salvaged from Geneva steel. This was virgin wood harvested from the northwest to build the roof of the rolling mills. It's large tongue-and-groove plank, about 4 inches by 3 inches. This is what we use to make our doors, put our floor in, and all of our furniture. One of the things that'll be impressive to you are the size of the doors. They each stand about 12 foot tall and weigh about half a ton each. These are made out of salvaged material from Geneva steel with a lot of iron on them. The centerpiece of the grand ballroom is our fireplace, extending up to the roof 37 feet. We made it out of salvaged material from an old pioneer home that was disassembled. We took that stone and cut it to make it reminiscent of the large fireplaces found in castles and also in some of our older national parks, such as Yellowstone and Grand Canyon Lodge. In the grand hall, you'll see 2 staircases extending up to the balconies to the upper levels of the castle. The iron and associated belly rolls give you this nice feel. We struggled with how you make grand chandeliers for such a big ballroom. How do you make them? We found drill pipe from discarded oil wells, and with gas pipe engineered these large, gracious chandeliers, including our sconces that you'll see around the edge of the windows. We've come a long ways since the start of the farm. I often reflect back as to the way the farm was. Would my great-great-grandfather, Joseph Wadley, be proud of our efforts? I think he would.